Good afternoon and welcome back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. I am sitting here with another very special guest for you today. We have with us Laurens Tijssen, who is an entrepreneur who started receiving online payments at age 14 and has since served over 150 clients across 10 plus industries, managed communities of over 30,000 members, and generated more than 20 million views by mastering online positioning and search dominance, earning him recognition as I Lopez's youngest guest speaker. Laurens, welcome to the show.
Super glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
And we're happy to have you here, and we're excited to have you here because it's an interesting topic that we're going to be diving into today. Before we do get into that, though, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show, and the question for you is, who has inspired you the most on your journey?
I love to start that way. There's actually so many people who have inspired me. I don't think there's one person I can truly point at to say that's the biggest inspiration. There will be so many people, from people I've watched videos from, read books from, worked with. So there's a big list. However, there is one particular name that comes to mind. When I was starting out on my journey, the first thing I did was watching videos online and scrolling to content on Twitter and kind of finding these people in the entrepreneurial space where I wanted to be. And there was this one person who was making a lot of videos related to self-improvement and business. And that gave me so much inspiration because it really opened up a whole new world to me. So that person is Dan Lok. He's quite big on social media. I used to follow him a lot. He was the first person I really saw online talking about business, about entrepreneurship. So that kind of was the entrance to me in this whole world. So that's definitely my answer.
I like that. I like that you saw those videos and you were able to actually apply that knowledge that you saw too. So before we dive a little bit further in here, we do have one standard question we like on the show, and that is, how do you define procrastination and what does it mean to you personally?
Yeah. Well, I do approach everything with nuance. So I always like to say, well, it depends on this, or it could be in this situation. But prior to the interview, I actually looked up what is the real definition of procrastination. And what's very funny is that Google mentions it's unnecessary delaying something. I think procrastination is kind of a bad frame. It's something which is not good to delay. Now, with that being said, don't get me wrong, because I think delaying things is completely natural. If you have a lot of responsibilities, if you have a team, if you have a lot of clients, you naturally have to delay things. You have to delegate things. It's just planning, right? So that process of not doing something right away is to me a natural thing. But the procrastination is kind of like a bad thing. That's the way how I see it. And what it truly means to me is it actually is something much more bigger than that small thing you might have to get rid of. It's more about not being stagnant. I was reading a book recently and it said that you have about 60,000 thoughts a day. And 95% of them are the same as the day before. So I like to think that the best way to go about procrastination is actually being able to reinvent yourself and to not stay in the same position. So it's the mindset, it's the approach, it's the day by day, it's how you vision life, it's how you plan out your day by day. I think that's the biggest thing. That's how I view it. That's what it means to me. Because you don't want to stay the same person at all times. You want to bring new energy in. You want to reinvent yourself. So you kind of have to make sure that that 5% breathes new life into yourself, where it compounds into making yourself better.
I really like that. And I like that approach and that mindset in order to do that. Let me ask you, why don't you dive a little bit into your journey? I'm sure we're excited to know. I mean, you accepted your first payment at 14 years old. Was that was that an online gig or what was that?
Yeah, so the very first thing I did online was making YouTube videos. Now, what I actually did is I was finding basically sound effects, some elements that people can use to edit videos. I was making videos related to gaming. I was playing video games and recording that because I watched all these people doing that and I was inspired. So I kind of did it on myself in a very immature way when I was like 13 years old. Then what I did, I was like, you know what? I always need to have these things to edit my videos. I need to have the sound effects. I want to have these effects. So I always looked them up, but I didn't have that one place where all of them were. So I created a YouTube channel. It was called Free YouTube Stuff. And it just had all these sound effects. Now, these were like 3 seconds videos, simple sounds, and it got me quite some views. I got like millions of views with it. And there was like a video, for example, 3 million views, which was like 3 seconds long. It was just a sound effect. Now, that YouTube channel gave all the impressions, and that led to my first payment, which was when I was 14 years old. Now, what was super funny is that I didn't even realize I was making that money. Because one day I was going to my YouTube account, and I was going to the AdSense platform. So YouTube, has the AdSense platform because people make money from the advertisements. And I saw that I had like $200, $300 there, which was like ready to get paid out. I just had to connect my bank account. So that was truly the first thing I did. Now that's kind of the starting point of my journey. I like to think that it was a great step because I kind of was in that creator mode. After that, I had many years where I didn't really do any entrepreneurial thing, let's say from like 15 to whatever age. But that really was a big entrance for me because I was creating things, I was expiring and just going through life. Now, that YouTube channel eventually got completely wiped out. I had to delete all the videos. I got copywriting strikes. This was before YouTube actually had these policies where you can't copyright things. Because all the things I had weren't original. I wasn't in a studio making sound effects. I was just downloading from the internet, putting it on my channel. So there's nothing anymore to find about that, unfortunately. I do have the documentation of the views and the payments, things like that. But that was truly the very first step. Going a few years in the future from that point, I went to college. When it was the first year in the summer vacation, decided to start my business, eventually dropped out in the middle of my exams, worked with some great people online, had the chance to very early on work with people who were super successful in business already. So worked on some projects there, already worked within multiple industries within the first few years, basically the first year actually. After that, I moved to another country and I'm kind of here in this position. So right now, I have my own company. We have a website agency where we really focus on world-class website, premium, automatic and ecosystem, and really helping it to empower empires, as we say. Next to that, I joined Influencer Press in December 2023, which is a US-based PR firm where we get clients on podcasts, publications, TV shows, you name it. And so that's kind of it. So right now I'm in this position where we truly help mainly entrepreneurs and companies amplify their reach, solidify their positioning, and truly give them that power. So that's basically it.
No, I like that. Thank you for sharing that. You've had a lot of successes as well along the way, but as we like to highlight on this show, success is kind of one side of it. But what do you think was your biggest challenge you had to overcome?
It's a great question. Well, it might be a little bit of a generic answer, but it's definitely that mindset. The biggest thing is actually changing who you are. And that's why when I first said the person who inspired me the most was Dan Lok. The reason for that was because it gave me access to a new world. I had some sort of interaction. I wasn't speaking to the guy. I was just checking his video. But it gave me some sort of entrance to this new world where somebody was talking about you can kind of design your life this way. You can, build skills and make money. And all of that is the biggest thing I had to go through, which is reprogramming who I was. I had to kind of reprogram everything, right? Everything which my friends were doing, the family, everybody in school with me. It was all kind of a completely different direction than where I wanted to go, which I had to figure out where I wanted to go. So the biggest obstacle, the biggest thing is that mindset. I still, to this day, now notice as well how important it is to have that mindset in check, to actually visualize where you want to go, to kind of manifestate that, through actions and also just by actual visualization. So that's the biggest thing. You have to reinvent yourself. You have to move out from a position, whether that's, dropping some friends, whether that's going to another country. To me, those are the things that actually have meant the most and had the biggest impact.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I just like to take a moment to kind of celebrate that too, because, just from a personal perspective, I didn't even really know what I wanted. And I use that term very loosely, like what direction where I really wanted to go until I was like 35. Well, there's a lot of people that don't even know that, but it's amazing that you have that vision already. And what is your ultimate vision?
Well, I think it's something that will continue to evolve, right? I think you will never be able to truly have one linear vision that will stay the same for always. For me, the approach I'm taking right now is quite realistic. Where I see myself as the next big step for me isn't truly much different from where I am right now. It's just some tweaks. For example, I'd really like to, have a bigger income, for example. I like to be in a position where the revenue I'm making is much larger than I'm doing right now. But that doesn't require me to have major steps. So the reason I also came to that is because to the few years of experience I do have, I kind of build up this realistic frame of, well, first of all, I first dreamed about, when I was starting out, I was dreaming about making 10K a month, $10,000 a month. That was the big dream. But then it came to a point where the number didn't really have that much meaning, but it's more like, okay, cool. Now I want to make sure that I have a certain team, that I can do this, and that all of this is delegated. So your goals, your visions continually change. It's a little bit hard for me to truly describe the ideal scenario, but I'd like to think more about that next step, right? So rather than the final destination, I'm more thinking about what is that big next step, which to me is primarily based on team building. It's being able to build myself in a way where I'm more competent, but also have a more competent team that allows me to actually build things and scale and move forward.
You know, I like the way that you put that, and it's true. We are always evolving. We are always not necessarily changing who we are, but we're getting more into who we're supposed to be. One of the questions I have for you is because there's always a lot of learning along the way, especially in entrepreneurship. Especially in entrepreneurship, where we tend to get faced with ourselves more often than we do when we're working in a corporate environment. What do you think was the most surprising thing you learned about yourself in your journey so far?
It's definitely how adaptable I am, because it's not just the business, it's also the personal side. But it's, you can basically go to any place in the world, physically or not physically, and you'll survive. Like, you're adaptable. That's kind of the biggest thing to me, where I learned you can go to a completely different environment and you will be naturally adjusted. So whether that's, for me, moving to a country has been a big part of my journey, but it's also moving into, let's say, a completely different type of industry, which is also that same, environment. So you could say, well, I'm basically in the same environment of me doing things online. I'm kind of, still using some of the knowledge I used in the previous work I did, but now I'm in a different context. Now I'm working with a different industry, or now I'm working kind of in a position where I manage more people. So these things are, to me, the biggest lessons, where I always know I can adapt. So if you put yourself in that next level frame, you're automatically adapting, and that becomes the standard. So the thing that I got surprised by the most is how natural that process is of being adaptable.
I like that you say adaptability, because it's true. I mean, we have to adapt pretty much on a daily basis now. Technology is moving so fast, right? Actually, that segues into what I wanted to talk to you about, because I know that you work with, kind of we'll call it visibility. We won't call it only marketing or only PR or only this. We'll call it visibility. And the question that I had for you is, with the advancements of technology, it seems like it's more difficult to stand out, especially given AI and everything's kind of being the same.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you tell your clients for that and the use of AI?
Yeah, it's obviously kind of like a buzz topic. AI, it's everywhere, because it's truly everywhere. Everybody's talking about it because it is truly everywhere, and a lot of people even don't notice that. But from what I've seen, that evolution is really fast, and it changes the way you position yourself and what impact your position have. What I saw a few years ago is, if you have a large following, you automatically have large views. You have a lot of impressions. So the game was really, specifically if you look at social media, you're building up this big audience, and that kind of stays with you. Now it's completely different. Now people have short form content. People don't really follow people, they follow content. So you can have 0 followers and get 1 million views. It's very realistic, right? And this only zooms in on the actual social media, the content part. But what stays a true element is the way you position yourself. And you have to look at every touch point that people have. Now, there will be some people who might see you for the first time. There will be people who see you for the 38th time. There will be people who follow you on social media, and there will be people going on sales calls with you. I think the biggest thing you want to make sure of is that your position is truly congruent. You want to make sure that it's world-class, it's positioned in a premium way, and that you also allow it to serve the purpose that you want it to serve. So meaning, let's say you're an online coach, you want to make money, you want to sell your services, you have to install those beliefs in every step of the way. You have to make sure that whenever people meet you, no matter where they are at, whether they visit your website, whether they go on a call with you, you have to always implement those buying beliefs. So the first step is outlining their positioning, right? What we do always with the PR services, we do an interview. So we get people on the call, we do a really deep dive interview, we go 5 levels deep, and we actually nail down the exact positioning. And that's the starting point, because you want to outline everything. And if you look at it from what I like to call the ecosystem focus, is you need to make sure that everything in place is supporting each other. So for example, a lot of people are using testimonials, right? Everybody has testimonials. So one thing you can do to stand out is obviously getting PR. Now, it's a little bit biased for me to say that, but it does play a role because it's a little bit more premium. It's less accessible than just having a testimonial. But even if you have a testimonial, you need to know how to leverage it. And that's the biggest thing. So being able to stand out is truly that. And then it doesn't matter whether it's, whether it's all this adaptability, whether it's people seeing you for the first time or not. You need to always position yourself in a good way. So let's say you have one testimonial. What do most people do? They either put it on their, Instagram or LinkedIn page, put it on a website, and that's it. But you can go much more deeper than that. You can actually make sure that when people, what we do, which is so great, I didn't even know it was possible until the team did it, which is absolutely amazing. But we have a Zoom call, and when people join the Zoom link, there's a testimonial video displaying of testimonials. It's such a small detail, but it plays such a big role. You can have in your contract, you can mention testimonials. You can have a welcome page after people paid you where you display a testimonial, right? So you have to look at all these different things that influences people to buy and truly leverage that. So that's kind of a big answer there. But that answer is basically fixed to no matter what's going on. So it doesn't matter what AI trends are going on. It doesn't matter if people, whatever that hype might be around it. It's just that solidified positioning that always plays a role, that always empowers you, essentially.
No, I love that. Thank you for that answer and that explanation. And I like how you said that PR is a little more premium, a little more, I guess, I'm not going to say it's not accessible. It's a little bit, takes a little more thought than putting out a lot of the other content. One of my own concerns, and you can tell me from your perspective, one of my own concerns with all these AI tools, especially on LinkedIn, is that every single article looks the same. And so it seems like we're writing for the algorithm and not for people anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Have you noticed this? Is this why maybe PR is going to really, I think PR might really take off because of that. What's your view on it?
Well, I think a lot of things are generic. It's the truth. A lot of content is generic. A lot of articles are generic. But it's more about what people see. And if you look at, for example, if you look at it from a design perspective, you want to make sure that everything is appealing to the eye. What we apply with PR is the VARC model. And this is a little bit more universal, whether it's content or specific types of PR. You want to make sure that you apply the different ways that people learn. Some people learn visually, some people learn through audio, some people learn through reading, kinesthetics. So that's the VARC model, which basically explains people learn through different ways. Now, if you apply that, you can kind of make sure that you're hitting all grounds, right? Because you have an article online, so people who prefer to read, they can see that. You have podcasts for people who like to listen or to watch, they have that. So tapping into different models helps. When it comes to basically standing out of that generic content, generic articles and things like that, you just also have to put it in a way where it serves you. Because you have to put in mind, what will people think if they see this? Now, you can go a lot of ways, for example, about articles, because you could have an extremely in-depth article with a lot of technical knowledge, a lot of value that you can share, but you can also have a more vision that's a little bit more short, tailored, it features you, it promotes you, it highlights some quick things. That's going to be more effective because people are not going to read the entire thing in most cases. So you want to make sure that it has a great picture, it has a great headline, it has some buttons, like some call to actions in between. So it's more about the way you use it rather than what it actually is. What I will add on to this as well is if you look at specifically articles, it's a super great thing because it's the basic form of content, right? Now, videos is extremely more popular, but articles still hold their value. And it's not just, sharing that online, but it's also the search result people have. Articles get published on a website is indexed in Google. So when people look up that, article, that type of topic that the article is related to, it can show up depending on the website and things like that. But that also plays a role. Now, I'm going to take it a level further. Right now, we are in this kind of AI era, right? And we're shifting from people using search engines to ask engines. People are using much more AI to ask things than to a Google to ask things. I personally use Grok from XAI, from Twitter. I use Grok way more than Google. I use Grok way more than anything else. It's kind of my daily interaction. So the shift, what's happening there is that people used to look for a direct answer and it shows you the results. And now people are asking for sim. Now, what's similar there is that both engines, whether it's the Google or the AI, they are fed of information. So articles is an extremely great way. No, not a lot of people talk about it, but it's an extremely great way to feed those engines as well. Because, for example, I can say this a little bit arrogant about myself, but ChatGPT knows who I am. It knows who my company is. You can ask about it. You can look it up, and that's designed that way. So even, the way people see you in that article, it's also how can you use that to almost ethically manipulate how you are perceived by AI, by search engines, by basically everything related to that.
No, you raise a valid point. And I mean, again, this is where I kind of wonder, say it's not the way that the content is presented, it's the way that you reutilize it.
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest part to me.
Okay. So we're okay with having all these long form content, and maybe that's my own sort of bias too, in that I don't want to write just to cater to, the algorithm, so to speak, but you're telling me that I pretty much have to if I want to be included in the Ask engine.
It's a great point, and I think it's quite nuanced, but that depends. Now, if you look at actually trying to feed into that search engine, into that, AI engine, let's say, you just want to have multiple sources. That's truly the answer. If you look at, for example, ranking on Google, SEO is a huge industry, right? There's a lot of agencies who are specialized in making you rank on Google. But the best things you can do doesn't require hiring an SEO agency. It's literally leveraging the biggest platforms. And that means, for example, one tip I always suggest people, especially for personal brands, is use your full name online, but use the same name on all platforms, right? If you look at my name on Google, you'll see my LinkedIn, you see my Instagram, you see all the platforms I have because I use the same name, so Google recognizes that. And those are the biggest websites there are. Instagram or Reddit or all these platforms get millions of views. So if you are on that as an account, it's going to be popped up in the first place. So no matter what type of technical SEO and all these complex things you're going to do, you're not going to outrank, in most cases, the biggest platforms that are already there. So that's a big thing, and that's a little bit similar with the AI things there, how to feed into that. What I will say is if you look at the actual strategy, let's say from the content, you can create content that's specifically designed to get impressions, to specifically try to get a lot of reach. I think the problem with that is you have a lot of vanity metrics. What do all these impressions mean if it's not funneled down to something? What does it truly get you, right? In a lot of cases, it doesn't get you anything. So you can better optimize the content you have, everything you have, for the people you do want to target. So it might not get as much views, it might not get all the exposure that you want, but it does allow you to control the way you are perceived. Somebody looks at your profile, your content is related to what you sell. It's showcasing your expertise. So those things are different strategies, completely different. Now you can have a little bit of a mix of both. You can apply all these different things. I personally think it's more interesting to be aligned in that ecosystem where you say, okay, cool, my content is related to what I'm doing. It's sharing the value rather than trying to get a ton of impressions, because all that's going to attract is people who are constantly looking for hypes. So they're not going to buy anyways. So
no, it's interesting what you say there, and vanity metrics. It's kind of like, so you're of the same mind then that if, I would rather put out a piece of content that got 100 views, but it actually got seen 100 times, because I mean, we all know that the attention span of people on the internet is, I don't know, less than a goldfish. I don't know. They say that. So, what winds up happening is, and I've seen this happen too, is, you get like 1 million, 2 million followers, right? But then you get maybe 6, 7, 8 views on all the content because everybody's sort of following everything and nobody really follows anything. Do you notice that?
Yeah, I agree. And what I always like to say is that the most important analytic is money in the bank. It's the truth. The most important thing is that analytic. Now, you want to, of course, go a few levels deeper. You want to identify the KPIs of certain things. If you're doing, a big content push, you want to know what type of content is working best, and you can adjust and you can optimize. But I don't think you have to be, attracted too much by these vanity metrics. You really have to figure out what are the high leverage activities, what is truly important. And I'm going to give you an example here as well. Everybody kind of understands now that having a personal brand is important. We all know it connects easier with a person than with a profile page of some company logo. That's kind of common sense science, you could say, right? Everybody knows that. So everybody who is going into this entrepreneurship field, they all know they should have their personal brand and all these things. So it's common sense. Because of that, what a lot of people think is, all right, cool. So I am my brand. I need to make content. And then they say, well, my content profile for my company doesn't really do anything. So I'm just going to completely neglect that, which is a good decision, because if you look at your KPIs, well, if you're just putting in all that work every week to make content for your company profile, it doesn't really do anything. If you put it in your personal profile, it actually works. So then people start to think to completely go into that and neglect the other part. Now, what I'm trying to say is here that pretty much everything plays a role. So something I've been trying to implement, which has been going quite good, is to use your company profile just for some background content, just to post some basic things. It's not optimized for getting impressions. It's not optimized for directly converting people. It's just there for the presence. It's just there so that if people look it up, they see there's some activity and they can see the blogs, they can see the testimonials. So that's like a huge thing if you look at the big picture, right? You can say what is important, what is high leverage activity. Okay, it's my personal brand, it's this content, it's this platform. But just because of the fact it will give from people looking at my company profile and also seeing their testimonials and also seeing their relevant use cases and all these things, it just plays a role. It all connects together. So there's so many nuances to it, but those are some things I'd always like to think of as well.
No, I love that. You know, as we're talking here, I'm beginning to see a little bit of a shift. I don't know if you've seen this shift or if maybe you're actually in the middle of this shift, but I remember, back in the day, going back when, not when dinosaurs roamed the earth, but, when we didn't really have as many online things and online presence we do today, everybody always looked for big company names. And it was sort of the opposite is what you're saying. We all look to, is this a big company that's providing this product? And if it was a big company, we would buy it. We wouldn't buy from like small businesses, but now it's almost like there's a shift in consulting, coaching, some products like, health related or food related. It seems like now you're right that this personal brand is important. And now it's almost like if there isn't a face of the company, people don't want to buy. Are you kind of noticing that, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
Yeah. I think it really is. I think people like to connect with people, right? So it's kind of like a natural byproduct. If you look at the biggest examples there are, it's funny because Microsoft was the biggest company, and then people knew Bill Gates because of that. Apply that to every other big company from the past. Amazon was a huge company, and Jeff Bezos is the guy from Amazon. Now it's different, right? It's different. People know the person first before they know the company a lot of times. It's very natural for that to happen. So I do think there's a shift. If you also look at today's example, Richard Branson company might have it's like 250,000 followers on Instagram, but his personal profile has 2 million or 20 million, whatever it is. So people always get more attention, more following. It's a natural thing, but everything has a role. If you look at it from what I like to call world-class branding, there's a concept called the brand triangle. And what it basically means is that you have your personal brand, you have your company brand, and you have your product brand. Now, in reality, you're always having all three, and all of them have a different role. Your personal brand is there for the connections, but your company brand is there for the actual credibility. Your company naturally has more credibility. People look at you, but they look at what's the company behind it. What is that company, right? That's the credibility vehicle. And your product brand is the conversions. So it might be that program you have or the offer you have. All depends on how you position it and things like that, which is quite deep I'm going with right now. But you're always able to leverage all these things, right? If you're a real estate agent and you're working for let's say you're working for one of the biggest real estate firms in New York, you're going to have more credibility because you work with that firm rather than who you are as a person. So it all applies on the context, it applies on how you leverage that, but it plays a role. And you have to look at the reality. You have to look at the nuances. So it's just a matter of how do we map out that ecosystem what branding do we apply to that, and how do we get the world-class effect, basically.
And just looking at that, what do you think is the biggest challenge in that triangle? Do you think it's personal branding? Do you think it's company branding? Or do you think it's product branding that's the most challenging?
I think personal branding, because it requires more effort. A personal brand requires way more. People have to follow you, the message, they're judging you as a person, all these different things. A company brand is a little bit more flat. It's a little more basic. It's the credibility of the people you work with, the work cases, all these different things, right? So the company is more neutral. As a person, you can be judged way quicker. You might say something related to politics or religion that you don't like, and that gives you a backlash. That gives people, people wouldn't like that. So your company isn't going to say those things. It's the person who says that. So I think it's difficult more to do a personal thing, but it's also definitely more effective, right? If you try to grow your brand fully focused from an anonymous profile out of the company name versus personal, you will definitely see the difference. Personal is definitely more effective, but it's more difficult, I think. So,
it's interesting that you mentioned that. And I'd be interested in hearing your take on it. I wasn't very involved in it. It seemed to come and go really, really fast too, because I don't see it anymore. I see a couple of profiles still. Those faceless profiles on Instagram where they were faceless and I don't even know. I didn't dig too deep into it. Is that still a thing?
absolutely, I think so, yeah. But it kind of depends what algorithm you're in, right? It depends what type of accounts are you following. So the social media works the same as the mind. Whatever you're going to attract, whatever you're going to feed into it, it's going to show you more of it. So it's definitely all there. Now, I do think there's a big shift. I had a call with a great friend of mine today who I met on Twitter a few years ago. I think it was like 2020 or something, which I initially mentioned him. And what was extremely big back then was affiliate marketing. There's all type of people who have anonymous profiles who are giving generic advice about mindset and business. And because of all those impressions, they were selling everybody the same ebook. That was really the big claim. It was huge. It was so huge. And the friend I was talking with today, we reflected on that because almost all of them either quit it or changed their profile to a personal profile. Like they changed it to their person. And then they had all this impression from the past, and now it's kind of irrelevant. So there's so many people stopping that as well. Now, I think faceless is pretty big. There's a lot of people, doing AI things in a lot of different industries, but it depends on what you attract, right? It depends what you like to concentrate on.
No, thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. It is interesting, like I don't even go on social media really. So what would you, just as a thing, what would you say to somebody who has no interest on being in social media at all? Who, doesn't want to, take the time for those platforms or anything like that. What can they do online if they don't use, the big meta conglomerate, right? So that'd be Facebook, Instagram. I guess I include X, but it's not really that, but it's included in the big conglomerate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, to be honest, I don't really know. I don't really like social media that much myself. I'm right now in a little bit of a different phase. I decided to not consume social media for 30 days. I'm on day 7 right now, and it's quite good actually. I don't really consume that much content anyways, but I do feel it's almost necessary to be on social media. Now, I don't think you'd have to make funny videos all day and you have to necessarily write 20 written posts and 2 long form threads all day. That's all just extra volume, but you should utilize it. Even if you're not really posting content, at least have a LinkedIn profile with just your career, some credibility so that you can connect with some people. I don't really know how people do it without it. Now, I'm coming from a different position. There's many people with, mortar, brick businesses, the physical things, the actual stores. I'm not from that. Like, I'm doing everything online since I'm 14 years old. So, like, this is my world. So I really don't know what other people do. I'm genuinely curious how they see this. So, well, it's hard for me to answer that. Now, what I will say is you can be very smart with how you distribute things. If you, for example, really like to write things, just use that and distribute that in another form through multiple platforms. So you don't necessarily have to force yourself to make all this content and be in all these places. Not necessarily. I don't think you necessarily need to make content. It's just how are you utilizing it. If you're a founder, if you're selling things online, well, I do think it's kind of necessary, but not always. Depends.
This has been a really great conversation, Laurens. A lot of good insight. We are coming up pretty close to the time. Is there anything that you wish I would have asked but didn't ask, or anything you feel we should have covered but we didn't cover today?
I think we had a great conversation. It turned out a little bit more technical than I expected, but I'd like to think that we've got some great insights covered. I don't think there's anything else truly that we might have to add here. I do think that the conversation of procrastination is very interesting. So maybe you can give some great final thoughts to that in central to the topics we talked about.
Well, I have to be honest. I mean, one of the things that I procrastinate on a little bit still myself is my brand and being on social media, because personally, I see it as if I go on social media, then I am at best kind of a hypocrite, and at worst, I'm kind of part of the problem, right? Because one of the core things that keep people distracted and addicted is, unfortunately, social media, like you said. But I've talked to many business owners, yourself included, that say they don't consume much. So my question is this: if more and more of that is happening, then what is the future of social media going to look like? Just a bunch of AI bots talking to AI bots? Like,
It's a good question, and honestly, there's nobody who can give a proper answer to that, I think. So what I will know, what I actually do know, what I think is important to mention, is that no matter what's happening in the world, no matter what type of new hype there is, no matter if you're considering doing email marketing or running advertising or starting a YouTube channel, the biggest sales hack in the world is who you are as a person. It's who you are as a business. So I would always put in effort to fix that. I would always put in effort to control how you are seen. Even if you're not really posting active content, you can just optimize your profiles a little bit by changing your actual username to your full name on all the same platforms, by getting a website with your personal name, with your personal name.com. That's a huge way to control it. You can set up an account on Medium, for example, which is a blogging platform. Just post 2 to 3 articles. Those are small things, and it will instantly allow you to dominate your search results. Or it will allow you to, whenever somebody does look you up, you're kind of, controlled there. At least put a link to your website in your profile so that when people see it, they see your website. Because, for example, a lot of people have their Facebook profile. They don't use it because now they're focused on another platform, but just at least put your website link in the Facebook profile, even if you're not using it. So even if you're not posting content, you can still optimize that step 0, right? So I think that's definitely something we can look at. And then also, no matter what type of AI or hype or whatever, you can always work on that step 1, that step 0, which is basically how are you positioned and how do you reinforce that?
excellent. Such a powerful note to end on. Thank you so much, Laurens, for being on the show today. Just before we go, what's the easiest way or the best way for our listeners to reach out and ask questions in case they want to look at some PR, or they want to,
Yep.
just learn more?
I definitely like to invite everybody to look at my website. I pretty much have organized everything right there. So it's my full name, laurenstijssen.com, which might be a little bit difficult for some people to pronounce, but you can always Google it up and it will show you all the results.
No, thank you for that. And to all our listeners, don't worry about, writing it down or trying to copy it. We are going to have a link in the show notes for you, make it easy. Once again, thank you so much for being on the show, Laurens. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in once again. Just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe go out and just try to be that motivation or inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.